When will AI replace real estate agents? The man who built one of the most powerful AI companies in the world weighs in on this question and more on this episode of the Playmakers podcast.
Joining us right now is Joe Lonsdale, 8VC founding partner, co-founder of Palantir.
In a Fox Business exclusive, let's bring in Joe Lonsdale. He co-founded Palantir, the big data company that uses AI.
There's about 100 things that we want to talk about, Joe.
Joining us to talk AI.
Joe Lonsdale, this will happen in just a couple minutes. Do not go anywhere.
Joe Lonsdale is general partner at 8VC and co-founder of Palantir, one of the most influential and deeply debated companies in AI. In this episode, we talk about what happens when AI begins automating the thinking, the advising, and the deal-making that we thought was once untouchable by AI. What's the timeline for change, who gets left behind, and what are the signs that the ground beneath us is already beginning to shift? What stays human, what doesn't, and how do top performers pull away from the pack? The Playmakers podcast begins in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Playmakers podcast, where we go inside the minds and moves of those shaping the future of real estate, with your host, Andrew Flachner.
Welcome back to the Playmakers podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Flachner, and today we are joined by Joe Lonsdale. Joe, how you doing?
Good to see you, Andrew.
For my audience that may not be as familiar with you or the companies you've built, I'm going to give a very quick rundown. Joe Lonsdale is founding partner at 8VC, a venture capital firm that's put billions of dollars behind startups, reshaping healthcare, logistics, and yes, real estate as well. He co-founded Palantir, which is a $315 billion AI and data analytics company that's being used everywhere from battlefield intelligence to healthcare, manufacturing, the worlds of finance. Palantir recently eclipsed OpenAI in terms of market cap. It is the number one top performing stock in the S&P 500 this year. You've probably seen Joe on national television talking about AI. He's one of the most prominent voices on how AI is reshaping work. And with all that cooking, you somehow found time for this interview. So thank you, Joe. Really,
it's good
it
to
means
catch
a lot.
up. Well, we invested in you over 10 years ago, and we're bullish on you, so it's good to catch up.
I appreciate it. Thanks again. All right, I want to set up this conversation around AI and work by talking about a recent interview that you did with Mark Andreessen. You described AI as this foundational technology for a new economic era. How would you describe this shift?
A lot of what drove America's prosperity was this major industrialization and manufacturing wave, right? Which there's all sorts of different fathers of that, whether it's Alexander Hamilton, whether it's McKinley, whether it's, many others. But that was like the core theme of what made America a leading economic engine. And then everything sort of shifted in the 1960s more to services, which, by the way, real estate's a great example of a very positive services area that was very profitable, that really did take off over the last 60 years in all sorts of areas. And there's a question right now, what is the driver the next 50 years? And Mark believes, as do I, that AI is going to play a very big role in this. Some of it's going to be completely transforming that services economy in lots of interesting ways with AI. Some of it's going to be hopefully a whole new advanced manufacturing, robotics economy. I mean, we have things right now, just as an example, you guys know Waymo, of course, these self-driving cars, like people behind that are helping us do construction automatically with no one in the machines. You can imagine running a quarry 3 times better or building buildings with fewer people involved. So there's going to be a whole new wave of just stuff built in the US, which is interesting too. And so the question is like, what does this mean for trade, for immigration, for everyone's current jobs? And it's an exciting time.
Well, even with flying taxis and autonomous construction, I mean, that will have impact on real estate and housing affordability. So if you told me 5 years ago that this was coming to market soon, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But now I do. I mean, talk to me a little bit about those companies and your involvement in them.
Well, yeah, the flying car stuff always sounds the craziest, right? But Joby Aviation's a public company. It's raised billions of dollars. Toyota just put in hundreds of millions more. It's launching in Dubai this year. The FAA has said it's the last step of certification. So these are effectively, they call them electric vertical takeoff and landing machines, right? They're 100 times quieter than helicopters. They're much more efficient. These are ultimately going to be commuting type vehicles, probably like an Uber-like business model. And you're right, that opens up a lot more places you can live affordably. And then on top of that, this new advanced manufacturing stuff with robotics, with AI, you're going to see homes be able to be built much, much more cheaply. So if this should be very disinflationary, should be very good for cost of living. maybe it'll be bad for housing prices, which actually is like a good thing for the up and coming people and a bad thing for the boomers, right? I can see some boomers having some trouble selling their homes for the same values 10 years from now if we're successful in building this new infrastructure and making new homes really cheap, but I think it'd be a great thing for the nation overall.
Right. And for those watching on YouTube, I'll pull up the video of the Joby Aviation stuff. It is so cool. But I would imagine that for second tier markets, it'll light those up. It'll allow you to work further away from your home. These things are, I don't know, 100 times quieter than a helicopter, and they allow you to get to work much faster.
I mean, there's those things. There's the tunnels from the Boring Company. We can now do very, very affordable and cheap tunnels for a very tiny amount of money relative to what our government lights on fire, every month. We can have tunnels everywhere in the country. We can basically get rid of traffic. I know maybe some of you guys love traffic, but personally, I really don't like traffic. I hope this is not like too partisan of a view to hate traffic. I don't think we should have it anymore, and there's no reason we should have to deal with that. And by the way, traffic hurts the working class, hurts the poor by far the most. Because you used to be, as a poor person, you used to be able to go to somewhere near a city and work your way up the city. Now it's too expensive to do that. And there's people, we're sitting here right now today in Northern California, there's people who regularly commute 3 hours a day to get to jobs here, past a bunch of empty land, by the way, going up and down because we've preserved it all, which sounds nice, but we've crushed these people. I mean, imagine if their commutes instead could be 10 or 20 minutes. It's a big deal for millions of Americans.
So I want to go back to this new economic era, the AI economy. What makes this different than the Industrial Revolution or the post-industrial era?
I think it's actually interesting, first of all, what's similar to these eras, which is that this should be a huge wave of productivity growth, right? So if you go back to like the core of how economics works, this is a really important point. The only way that we all get wealthier, that the country as a whole, that everyone in the country does better, is higher productivity, which means doing more with less, right? So a lot of people, they get confused about this. They think jobs is what matters. If we all wanted to have jobs, at the limit, we could ban farm tools, and you and I would both be farmers.
Right.
I don't know, maybe we'd find a way to avoid being like the 1 in 1,000 people who didn't have to farm at that point. But you basically have to all be farmers in order to have enough food. So of course, you want higher productivity. You want to be able to do more with less. And so that way, it's very similar. Like we should have a huge productivity boom in the next 10 or 20 years. The way it's different, of course, is that this is obviously an entirely different technology, attacks different industries first. We're not going to be replacing farmers right away with this. We're not going to be replacing. At first, there's probably not going to be very much impact on blue-collar workers. I think it's actually, if anything, going to increase the demand for a lot of blue-collar things as we start building more and having more economic activity. You probably will replace a lot of services workers. You probably will make a lot of kind of bureaucracy and committees and paperwork and lawyers like a lot more efficient. And so you're going to need fewer of them overall.
So that's a great segue. I want to talk about an interview that you did on CNBC. You're talking specifically about the services economy. My audience is in the services economy, right? They sell homes, they manage clients, they make deals, they are relied upon for trust and communication. How quickly do you think AI is going to reshape the services labor market?
Well, so when you do something in services, you're doing a lot of things, right? I think all of us who like start to study real estate realize if you're a real estate agent, there's actually maybe like hundreds of little types of things you have to do that are one-off, that add up, that interact with systems and paperwork and all sorts of esoteric knowledge. And so what AI should do if it's done correctly, you should look at the Palantir approach to how you think about these things. We have what's called an ontology or a schema of the workflows, right? So at first you have all the data in a space, you organize all the data, but then you organize all of the workflows on top of that data, which is like, what is every little thing someone does? And for property management as another example, there's literally thousands of workflows in property management. It's very complicated. So in order to build these things, AI is very good at some things, but it has very bad common sense. So in order to build these things, you map out all of the workflows and you say, what is it that the real estate agent as a person is still going to be better at and needed for, which is probably a lot of things. And then what is it that the AI could do for them? And the ultimate answer is that you end up making each of the really great agents a lot more efficient. Like a great agent will be able to handle a lot more, and their sort of back office and assistance will mostly be managed by AI.
Right.
And so each agent will have, maybe instead of having 10 assistants, they'll have 2 assistants, and they'll have a lot more AI agents helping them on things. And each agent will then be able to do a multiple of the work. Like that would be where this goes and making the industry more productive. And it makes each agent, by the way, a lot more profitable, but probably the best agents win and the second and third tier agents probably get replaced,
Right. A lot of people think of AI as this runaway train. In a recent interview, you talked about how we don't live in exponentials and it looks more like an S-curve. Can you talk about what you meant there?
One model, which is the singularity model, is that we live in an exponential world where things just keep getting better and better and better and self-improve, and we hit this point. This is almost like a religious view in the tech world where it's the coming of the Messiah. You hit an exponential and everything changes a million X because it just starts improving on itself. And that is one view, is the Messiah is coming and the Messiah is AI. And this is maybe a very kind of silly but important conversation to debate. That's not my view of what's happening here. My view, when I say an S curve, certain things improve very quickly and then they hit some limits and they taper off. And I guess the way the universe tends to be designed, the way humanity tends to work is that most of these things will get a lot better and then they'll hit some boundaries and they won't just infinitely explode into a Messiah is my bias. Now, this is a big debate and there's smart people who disagree with me. So that it is an interesting question for our future.
What do you think is responsible for that asymptote? Is it regulatory? Is it just technological limits?
I don't think these things can infinitely improve themselves. I think there's natural limits to how much power is required, how much intelligence comes from certain processes. I guess my bias is there's things we don't understand about common sense and how the brain actually works and how you actually think about and solve things. I think a lot of the processes we're harnessing are really compelling statistical processes that are not able to integrate kind of logic and IQ in the same way. Now, again, I could be wrong. Some people think that all of IQ can be explained by these relatively simple transformer processes. It's not my bias. So I think they'll be very good at some things statistically, but I don't think we've solved the whole universe. And I don't think they will necessarily solve the whole universe all at once. So that's the debate.
Gosh, I think 8 years ago, you wrote an essay about man-machine symbiosis. And for people who aren't familiar with that term, do you mind explaining that? And given where we are with AI, do you still feel the way you did 8 years ago about technology working alongside humans?
Yeah, so this guy Licklider was a very famous early computer scientist and theorist in the 1960s, and his framing, which is still very useful today, was about man-machine symbiosis, which is that there's certain things people are better at, and certain things machines are better at, and so the machines do the routinizable work, and then the people do the higher level work, and obviously there's higher level things machines can do today that these guys never imagined in the 1960s, right? And so there are a lot more things a machine can do. When I first came up with this for Palantir, when we were starting Palantir 20 years ago, we talk about man-machine symbiosis and we talk about chess. Because in chess, there's two types of frameworks. There's tactics. Tactics are precise things on the board you can calculate, in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 moves that can force you to win a piece, force you to checkmate, force a position. And there's position play, which is much more a theoretical thing that's really hard to calculate. It's impossible to calculate precisely, that involves things 20 or 30 moves ahead about frameworks of the position. And in the 2000s, even though the chess engines had beat Kasparov, were the best in the world, they still were much worse at position play because it was impossible to calculate. And so the very best players in the world were a person helping with the position play and a computer helping with the tactics. And the combination would crush any computer. Now, in chess, that's no longer true today. In chess, what we've seen, which is kind of creepy, we've taught the computer to play itself billions of times with all sorts of high-level frameworks, and it actually has figured out position play better than people, not only in chess, but in Go as well, which is one of the only games more complicated than chess to calculate. So there are constrained areas where you no longer have man-machine symbiosis. You just have the machines doing the high-level things, which is scary. Now, however, I think there's a lot of other problems that are much, much harder than chess and Go, that are the real world, that involve common sense, that involve humans working with each other. I think the computers are still very far away from solving all of those. And so you still have, in most of the real life areas, there's man-machine symbiosis in running your company. You don't have a computer just in charge of your company, right? You don't have a computer in charge of your relationship with your spouse and your kids, right? It's there's things that you're better at, that people are better at, that hopefully they will always be better at in some ways. It is a very scary contention for the exponential people who say, oh no, they're just going to be better at everything. And so I don't think they will be, but regardless, almost not worth even arguing about that Messiah question, because for now there is man-machine symbiosis, and there probably will be for quite a while. And if there's not, that's a whole different world. But if there is, let's figure out what do the computers do, what do we do, and it's a really important framework for how we build our companies.
When you look ahead to GPT-7, GPT-8, will AI replace real estate agents, or will these high trust, relationship-driven businesses be more insulated?
Well, like anything else, there may be some points at which, just like it got better at chess, it gets better at every area there. I think there's certain areas there, though, that are very human, that are very much a person talking to people to know what's available and know the market and be able to navigate and be able to give people comfort and working on it. You just think about these high-level workflows. There's probably going to be a lot of roles for very talented people who are like really insiders in these areas that you're going to want to use to see what's going on, that you're going to want to know to get to before things come on the market, because they know the right people and know who to ask, right? There's just all these human networks that the AI is not in, because it's not even human and no one wants to talk to it about things, right? So in general, it seems to me like the very high-end agents will actually not only persist, but actually be a lot more productive using AI. I do think it probably does replace a lot, and probably already starting to, a lot of the low end and middle end. And so does it replace all agents? Probably not for a very long time, but does it help the best ones and put pressure on everyone else? Almost for sure.
And I also think that for these high trust, relationship driven industries, there's something to be said about working with a human who has seen so many different permutations of how a transaction can take shape.
100% could warn you, could give you advice, could just like to know what the human nature of the people you're working with and they're selling and how to handle them. And there's a property near me where I live in Texas, and like I think someone passed away, and we want to, they might want to sell it, but how do you approach that without, appropriately? It's a very delicate situation, and it's just all these things that are human questions that I would much rather trust a human to help us with.
So when you talk about how there's going to be this bifurcation of the top performing knowledge workers or real estate agents, and then those who, might get consolidated with the surge of AI. Talk to me about how you think knowledge workers should best prepare themselves for this AI wave.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to Licklider again with the routinizable work. Like if you can define your work really well, and it's not using like human level relationships, human level common sense, to the spirit of like go get them, and of being entrepreneurial, of trying things, then you're probably going to be more easily replaced. So I think a lot of the traditional kind of very comfortable, maybe very boring middle class type jobs are going to be kind of challenged over the next 10 or 20 years. Now, like everything else, I think it also creates the ability to do lots of new things, but you're going to have to use a little more agency, right? I think people are going to have to learn agency again. They're going to have to learn how to think about, how am I going to help use this to build, to do something fun, to create. I mean, it's amazing. There's these new tools, Andrew, right now, where you could just like describe a game and you can make games and people can play them. And it's like it's like almost anyone can build a game now
without one line of code,
without having to be a coder. You just have to be a smart enough person to think about it and iterate. And there's going to be so many things like that. Like you're going to be able to take land that costs almost nothing in our country and go, who knows? Maybe you build like a weird giant system of caves to explore and you sell it out, right? So it sounds crazy, right? But it's like if you have robots doing it, it's cheap. Or or who knows what you build, or maybe you do a whole new thing with farming with them, and you just do the food in a way that's intriguing to people and that tells a story, or whatever you want. Wherever you create a new museum, I mean, there's infinite interesting experiences to create. There's ways to serve and delight others, but there's going to have to be over time. Our kids are going to have more agency 20 years from now about how to use things and do things. Because if it's just a really, really simple, well-defined thing, like that's going to be easier to replace.
And what are the industries you think are the early adopters of AI that are already seeing those tailwinds?
I mean, you're getting a lot of productivity in the Fortune like 500 in general. I think Michael Dell is one of the more impressive entrepreneurs in our country these days. I've gotten to know him a little bit living in Texas, and he's already reportedly saving billions and billions of dollars for his company with productivity, with AI, as is his job of every CEO. And a lot of people are studying that, or studying others, and starting to do this. And so I think you're seeing it with legal workflows. You're seeing it with like billing workflows and healthcare and logistics billing. You're seeing it with like, I was talking to some guys doing it for accounts receivable the other day, which is a massive workflow and tens of thousands of corporations that probably should have like a third of the staff it does right now, but then be done much better. So there's all these areas. And again, it sounds heartless talking about these things because you're like, oh, Joe, you seem excited about destroying jobs. Isn't that bad? And again, you have to go back to like the core of how economics work. The only way we all get wealthier, the only way society does better is doing more with less. And so you actually have to destroy jobs that way, but then create jobs by building new things, which is what we're doing.
And where are we in that S curve right now?
Right now in America, there are millions of unfilled jobs. There are millions of unfilled jobs. Like the reason people do not have a job, and this is like very offensive to people. Unfortunately, I'm not a politician, so I can say it. But the reason people do not have a job is because they are not willing to go work and study and figure something out. Like there are literally millions of vocational jobs where if you want to go to community college or technical school, there are so many people who want to hire you, but you have to not be lazy. You have to go study. You have to work. You have to be willing to do that sort of job. So it's like we are not short of jobs at all, and we are starting to ramp up and replace jobs in a bunch of these areas and are starting to destroy some unnecessary jobs. We're still relatively slow at doing that. There's still massive demand overall in our economy. I actually think that we're never going to get to a point where we just like have tons of unemployed people who can't find work with this, because I actually see all these jobs we're still in demand for. I think it's more of a cultural question of, are people willing to retrain? Are people willing to like seek things? Or are they just going to want to become Luddites who get angry that they lost their like healthcare billing job? And that's an interesting cultural question. I don't know the answer to that.
So you've cautioned around overhyping AI in some ways, and also you've cautioned against underestimating it. I'm just curious, what are you afraid of when it comes to AI, like 5, 10, 15 years out?
I mean, listen, I've built more defense companies than anybody else using this stuff. So as well as the other industries I work in, we founded Palantir, co-founder of Epirus and Saronic, rebuilding our Navy, rebuilding ability to shoot down electronic stuff miles away. It is really scary what AI does for warfare. But because it's really scary and it's changing it, that means we have to do it, because otherwise the bad guys will get way ahead of us. Like the whole point is when there's a change, you have to like what a courageous leader does is they run towards the change, they figure it out, they figure out how to do it safely and better to keep us safe. And that's what we're doing. Doesn't mean it's not scary. It's crazy. You're watching the front lines in Ukraine, Russia. There's like millions of these like AI drones going at each other back and forth. I think Ukraine's going to make like 5 million drones this year. I don't know how many Russia's going to make. These are insane numbers. Right. And it is absolutely terrifying. You can imagine someone getting a pickup truck, putting 5,000 of these in there, going to a stadium, and each one goes up and goes after a person in the stadium. It's terrifying, right? So I think there's all sorts of new threats of terrorism and warfare. That's one. I think there's all sorts of threats on the bio side that are very scary. Again, I think we are curing a lot of diseases right now in biotech, but you get a rogue grad student who's a genius who, for some reason, wants to hurt people, a new Kaczynski or whatever it is. I think we have to be watching, DNA synthesis machines, because there's horrible things they could do using AI that are much easier to do now than they were before. It's something that we're trying to talk, I think, about. I think overall people overestimate the economic threat. I think actually economically it's just like very disinflationary, very good for poor people, very good for our wealth. America's going to do much better. Like, thank goodness for this stuff the next 10 years, assuming we don't regulate it away, which is another question, right? But I think overall it's very good for America, but it does have these like scary outlying threats, and that's something we have to figure out.
All right, Joe, this has been fascinating. I want to wrap up the interview with some rapid fire hot takes. What is one job that AI will eliminate entirely in 10 years?
In 10 years, it will probably get rid of all the Uber drivers.
What is one job that AI will never replace?
I don't think it'll replace parents.
That's a good answer. I have some job security. You do too. What disciplines should our kids be immersed in to best position themselves for this future?
I think kids should understand economics and productivity, and I think they should understand like agency and entrepreneurship and how to try things and how to try and fail and iterate. I think that's really important.
What about computer science?
Computer science is very useful because you need to understand like the framework. So I think everyone should know math. I think everyone should know computer science. These are the building blocks of our world. And if you don't understand how our world works, you're never going to be the key leader in it and running it. So I think our generation, you already see the real leaders all have a pretty good understanding of computer science for the very top of what's going on. And I think that'll still be the case. You may not have to like be an expert in coding. Like, I don't have to be an expert in machine language anymore, although I did understand how it works and took the course. You may not have to be the very best coder, but you really should understand the frameworks and the structures of algorithms in computer science. Otherwise, you won't really know what's happening. And so I still think conceptually, like something Elon's really good at with his companies is he digs way down into the details and really understands every angle of what's going on. And that allows him to fix a problem and then like take it all the way back up to the top. So great leaders are substantive and have that. Like, if you don't have that substantive ability, you can still be successful in the world. You're never going to be the very top, is my view.
Outside of Uber driving, if you had to make a bet on one industry that would be totally transformed by AI in the next 5 years, what would that be?
See, this is tough because there's things that should be totally transformed, like healthcare, that definitely won't be because they're massively overregulated. So it's going to take us a long time to actually fix it. I guess what I would say is that there will be examples of education that is completely different than it is today, that is much better. I'm only starting to see the beginnings of that. So education itself, in terms of what is obviously the best, will be completely transformed. Now, because of the teachers' unions and the administrative unions and all the politics, the industry itself is going to look very similar for 95%, but it'll be obvious to everyone smart that 5% is just totally different. And then it's just going to be a matter of politics, overcoming inertia to fix the rest of it.
Yeah, when it comes to education, you have a lot of experience in that. Do you mind sharing a little bit on what you're working on in Austin?
There's actually two things that's funny enough. Well, my wife has her own school for K to 8, and we're big fans of Alpha with Jill Lamont. But then we also have, of course, the main thing is University of Austin. We are building a competitor to Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. We wanted one top university in this country that is not influenced by these radicals and that teaches kids to be courageous. And I mean, imagine having like a journalism school where the journalists don't all come out hating business people, or an education school that actually studies these things in a nonpartisan way, not captured by the unions, about what's working or not in education with science and statistics. And so we're working on the next great American university. We have lots of top kids coming there. Our second class is starting in the fall.
Do you have a book, essay, or thinker that's shaping your current view of technology?
I think Matt Ridley, Viscount Ridley from England, is one of my favorites still. I think Evolution of Everything is just a really good way to understand like basic systems thinking. And he's written a lot of other great things as well. But if you're not familiar with Ridley, it's a great author, Ridley.
Okay, I'll check it out. Final thought for my audience, how they can best prepare themselves for this AI wave.
I think it's all about agency. Like, play with the tools, like try them out, try out the new technology. Don't be afraid of it. It's really easy to download and engage with these things. It's really fun to do it with your kids or grandkids and ask them questions and have them draw whatever, like the princess or unicorn. I have 5 daughters, so whatever the kid describes, it's really fun to play with it and then experiment how it works for your own work. It's getting better every month, and so the only way to prepare for it is to be engaged with it, to be interested in it, to play with it. Like, humans evolved play, because that's actually how like our brain like learns new things. Like, so you should be playing with it and having fun with it. And if you're not going to keep up.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew.
To everyone watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, please be sure to subscribe so you're notified about conversations like this one. If you would like highlights, please find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. This is the Playmakers podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Flachner, and we'll see you next time.